On today's panel, we're talking about buying an existing home versus building your own from scratch. Joining me on the panel, David Hallet from Archicentre, from the REIV, Robert Larocca, and Dennis Hogan from the Victorian Building Commission. Start with you, Dennis.
Yes.
What would you say would be the benefits of building your own new home?
Yeah, well, you can design and get what you want with new. So it's all new. You can get a new design that's you have the modern facilities in it and fixtures in it, and also you can choose what location you want as well. I think the location is really, really important. So I suppose it's a choice about whether I want a brand new home, and I can afford it too, of course, versus maybe an existing area where transport and schools, all those things are important. So a lot of the newer greenfield sites are still developing, of course, and a lot of them don't have public transport. So it's a lot of decisions to make around that, whether you're going to have a new home, which is brand new, and I can choose the colours and all the fixtures and those sorts of things I want in it, versus I'll have to work with the existing one. I've got an existing home, and then just improve it over time as time goes on.
Robert, thoughts?
Well, you've got to have regard to three issues. I think three key issues. One of them is personal preference, which is what Dennis was talking about. What do you want? It is your house. You're going to live in it for a long time. All goes well. The second one is the cost issues that are associated, because there are different cost structures to buying an existing home versus a new one, and different outcomes about the value, of course, in the end. They will have a different value in the end depending upon the underlying land value. You don't want to overcapitalise a site, because ultimately you're going to sell a property, in comparison to the other houses in that suburb. Sometimes you see in a suburb with a quite low median price, the $1 million house that takes forever to sell because people aren't looking for that sort of thing. And the third thing, of course, is planning issues, because in developing in a lot of existing areas, there are existing planning issues you have to have regard to. So you might have to include in there all the timing that you need to go through the planning process, and that can affect the outcome as well, if you have to look after heritage issues in there too. David,
some people have a belief that old houses are built better than houses nowadays, that the practices, or that there's more longevity. Would that be something you'd support?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think new homes are built just as well as they ever have been, and certainly some older homes weren't built terribly well at all. And if they haven't been well maintained, which is a critical part of home ownership, they're going to have deteriorated quite significantly. I'd agree with Dennis. The first decision anyone needs to make is, do they want to live in a brand new home, or do they want to live in an older home and renovate it? And once you've made that decision, that's going to help you determine then, are we buying perhaps a new home off the rack or out of the catalogue, as it were, or are we commissioning someone to design it for us, so it's a one-off? If you're going down the older home road, are we buying something that doesn't need any work at all, or are we buying something with the intention of renovating it and turning it into something a little more tailored for our family?
What's your view of house and land packages then, when developers are bundling everything in together? Is it, or would you think people should be maybe planning each step of the process themselves?
Oh, look, I don't think it's up to me to dictate what anyone should or shouldn't be doing. I think they're very different alternatives. I think a house and land package is cost effective, and all things going well, it's reasonably timely. What it isn't necessarily going to give you is what you want, though. You'll be buying off the rack, as it were, and a lot of people will find that they can't find a plan or a home that is perfectly suited to them, that they can find a number that are close enough. They can't find one that's just right. And of course, it's got as much as anything to do with where you want to live, because the house and land packages often aren't well located with respect to transport and services and facilities. They're in some of the outer areas, the newer subdivisions, perfectly nice places to live, but not necessarily well serviced.
Unless it's a medium high rise in the inner city.
Exactly. Yeah, so a lot of people are, these days, we've certainly over the last several years, we first noticed it in Sydney, incidentally, some years ago. We're seeing it more and more often now, where people are buying an older home in an established suburb, knocking it over and building a brand new one.
A new one as well. But the display homes that you talk about, Des, there's a range, so it depends on how much money you've got to spend. You can actually look at the various ranges of how much dollars and what can I actually get for my dollars, and that's what you can do with the display homes. Versus if I want to go to David and get David to design myself a home, and here's my block of land, quite often we, and David probably be able to confirm this, we design something that we can't afford. We want all the mod cons in the home, and we want it big, and we want 4 bedrooms and the study and all those things. And all of a sudden, we're $100,000 more than what we can afford. So I think that's the other challenge with all that, is to understand what are the costs and what can I actually afford.
The cost is an interesting point because there are savings, of course, on stamp duty for house and land packages, because you're just paying on the component of the land, not the house. And if you're a first home buyer, it's very fiscally advantageous to buy or build a new home. You can find grants of around $13,000 from the state government if your purchase is under $600,000, and an additional $6,500 if you're doing it in regional Victoria. And that's all on top of the $7,000 grant. So, I mean, the state government are really saying to people buying their first home, go buy a new one.
Okay, David, so someone decides they want to start from scratch. Where do they start? A bit of due diligence, I suppose, and chasing down an architect?
Well, purchasing some land, of course, in the first instance is always going to be the first step, and if possible, getting something with a north-facing rear aspect is going to make the design task a little easier, because you're going to be able to orient the home to the north, which is optimal from a sustainability point of view, and with all of those living spaces then facing the back garden. So that's really what you'd regard as the ideal site. And certainly Rob would agree that if an agent is selling a property with a north-facing rear garden, they certainly tell everyone about it, because it's a very appealing proposition. Having done that, a concept design is really the starting point to get a good sense of what's possible on that property and what it might cost. As Dennis said, you've got to have a good early understanding of what this building is likely to cost you before you go down the road of commissioning detailed plans, making application for permits, and perhaps not finding out until you start getting prices that this thing is more than you've got to spend on it.
Perhaps the key word in there, sustainability. Obviously the big changing factor in the last 10 or 15 years, and something people have to consider. Yeah,
absolutely. And Dennis will confirm that we've moved recently from a 5-star standard to a 6-star standard, and that's on the back of starting with a 4-star standard in 2004.
How many stars can we eventually add?
Oh, yeah, it's probably a question for Dennis. I think we may get to 7.
You can design to 10 stars, Des.
Yes.
And we have many examples of builders that are designing and building 7- and 8-star homes.
So what's an 8-star home got that makes it an 8-star home?
Well, obviously the object is to reduce your energy bills as far as heating and cooling the home. Orientation is what David said before. The orientation on the site is a critical one.
Is that something you think people are aware of, Robert? Are people becoming more aware that sustainability is just now, that's here to stay, and it's something that's only going to get tougher regulation-wise?
Look, most certainly. I don't think there's any doubt in that. I mean, a few years ago we conducted a survey of over 1,000 people about their general views about green issues, and that was very high on the register. Over 90% said that was important to them. So that means that when they're going out and building their own home, you'd be surprised to find that they don't include that as a base measure. And I think designers and architects are doing it naturally, partly because of the regulatory need, but also because it can create a more comfortable home, which is more enjoyable to live in and cheaper to run over the life of it. So it's just where it is.
A lot to think about if you're deciding to build your own home, or obviously upgrading an older home to meet those standards. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. There you have it. Building versus buying an old house. Plenty of food for thought.